The coconut nut is a giant nut. If you eat too much, you'll get really fat. The coconut nut is a big, big nut, but the delicious nut is not a nut. It's the cocoa fruit of the cocoa tree from the cocoa palm family. G'day, Geranium Man here. Here's a typical technical problem. We have identical plants in identical containers. One is thriving, one isn't. What could be the problem? This one gets half an hour more morning sun than this one, but this one gets half an hour more afternoon sun than... What's that? Up there, in the sky. It's a bird. It's a plane. No! It's a kookaburra. I thought that was my mate Superman dropping in for a cappuccino. Anyway, back to the boring stuff of science. When selecting containers for plants, you always need to know or check that the drainage is good. This one has one drainage hole right down the bottom, so it's always going to struggle. So it's going to get most of its air from the top. Now, to check if this soil's any good, it feels like it's fairly compact. So if I dig this plant out, gently dig it out, and we'll have a look at the roots. Oh yes, look, the root system's disgusting. Hardly any root system there to support that plant. If you have a look at the bottom there. A root system on a healthy plant should be as big as the foliage. Now this root system's appalling, and I'm betting it's because there is no air in that potting mix. This is how a healthy root system should look in well-made potting mix. I've gently massaged the soil away. You can see what a massive fibrous root system we have here. It's almost as big as the top of the plant. And if you smell it, it smells really healthy and fresh. That's a good sign of aeration in the potting mix. When purchasing a geranium from your garden centre or nursery, a way to tell if it's grown in good potting mix is to just give it a little wiggle. If it's loose, then you know that there's insufficient aeration of the potting mix. If the foliage is floppy, you also know that that's insufficient aeration of the potting mix, or it's been over fertilised. Another thing to look out for, if the buds are brown, that's another good indication of diseased roots. Don't buy them. So rather than throw this potting mix out, I reckon you should just dig it out, put it in a container like this, and this is where you'll see the coconut song is so important. Yeah, it's very, there's no roots down here at all. There's no air. See, a plant's foliage needs carbon dioxide. It then turns that into sugar and oxygen via a process we all know as photosynthesis. But the roots of a plant need oxygen, which they get from the atmosphere. So if it's too gluggy, how can this plant possibly breathe? It can't. So the roots will die and the plant will not reach its full potential. Now remember that most potting mixes are made from composting pine bark. They say they're composted, but they're not, they're composting. That means when you use them, they're going to keep breaking down, and the more they break down, the more they compress. So a good way to counteract that is after a year or so, and this is where the coconuts come in, go to your local nursery and you can buy in 4 kilogram blocks a product called cocoa peat. You have to thoroughly wet it and mix it into this mix. I would mix maybe 20%. And the beauty of cocoa peat and cocoa chip is that it holds a lot of air. If you look at that, it's full of air. It springs open. So that's going to hold the potting mix open and allow the root system to breathe. So I reckon that's probably about all I'd need. So don't go and buy any more potting mix, just regenerate what you have. Mix that through thoroughly, like so. Get your hands into the soil, good for you. Nothing like getting your hands dirty. Then into that, you're going to need to add some Osmocote and some dolomite. Now I would go maybe half a cup of dolomite into that. Now what that will do is give the plant lots of calcium and magnesium, and it will hold the pH up. You're trying to aim for a pH of about 6. And then into that as well about half a cup of slow release fertiliser, 8 to 9 months, with trace elements. Make sure it's got the trace elements, because plants need more than just nitrogen, potassium and phosphorus to survive. They need also trace elements. Mix that in thoroughly. Slow release fertilisers work much better if they're mixed through the mix. So you've done that. If you just throw the fertiliser on top, you can just vulcanise off into the atmosphere and you waste it. So it's much more efficient to mix it through. So there you have it. You now have a mix. Look at that. I can't compact that. It's open. It's breathing. The roots will breathe now. We'll just fill that back up. See how that's like a sponge now? As it opens, it breathes, pulls the air in. So now all we do is put our sick plant back in, dig a little hole, dig back in there, and we'll have to give him a thorough watering. Now I bet you that'll be like that in a couple of months. So as you can see, coconut fibre, or koi peat, is one of the most useful things you can add into a potting mix. It holds air and moisture, everything that the plant needs to thrive on. So the coconut, humble little coconut, is well worth singing a song about. The coconut nut is a giant nut. If you eat too much, you'll get really fat. Now the coconut nut is a big, big nut, but its delicious nut is not a nut. It's the cocoa fruit of the cocoa tree, from the cocoa palm family.